So, I just got done watching John Candy I Like Me, and now I'm going to review it. This movie just came out on October 10th, 2025 on Amazon Prime as an original, and I felt like talking about it. This movie caught my interest as soon as I heard about it. Like I said, this movie was an Amazon Prime thing, and I am still getting Amazon Prime, at least for this month. So I decided to take advantage of that and give this movie a watch because this one looked very interesting. And if I'm going to be having Prime for this month, might as well take advantage of it for something that looks fascinating like this movie. Now I'm going into this movie relatively fresh, by the way. Like I've seen some advertising for this movie online and on social media, but I never watched the trailer for it. Wanted to go into this movie completely fresh as much as I could. And I knew about this guy before. I've seen a little bit of his stuff. I haven't seen too much of the films that John Candy was in. But again, like I said, I've seen bits and pieces of him before. I've definitely heard of this guy prior to this documentary. I'm surprised it took him this long to even make a documentary about John Candy, in all honesty. You would have think they would have done a documentary like this a lot sooner instead of 2025. The basic premise of this documentary film is that John Candy began his career on the sketch comedy series Second City Television before becoming a popular and beloved star of comedy films until his death of a heart attack in 1994. The film relies primarily on rare and never before seen archive footage, outtakes, private home video, audio commentary, and interviews provided by family and friends that he worked with. Now that I just got done watching the entire movie, what do I think about it? I liked it. This was a nice documentary about John Candy during his entire career, from when he was a young kid, his rise of fame, all the way up until he died in 1994. It was some very fascinating info and interesting stuff that kept me engaged throughout this entire watch. I liked hearing what the people who worked with John Candy had to say about him. We even got some famous people in here that used to work with John Candy in the past, like Harold Ramis in archive footage, Mel Brooks, Tom Hanks, Conan O'Brien, and Macaulay Culkin. This documentary was pretty interesting. It held my attention for the most part. There might have been a few minor moments that were a little bit dull, but a lot of it is pretty fascinating info about what John Candy was like, stuff that he went through, and how there was stuff that led to his death, like eating lots of junk food, smoking, drinking, all that stuff. All this stuff was before I was born, but even then I definitely knew about some of the stuff John Candy was in, especially in the second half of this film when they were showing off more of his movie roles, and some of the bigger roles that he was in, like Spaceballs, Cool Runnings, National Lampoon's Vacation, Home Alone, Baseballs, and Nothing But Trouble. Yeah, and for a documentary, this was well done. A lot of good interviews, nicely filmed, great using of old footage whenever they needed to for context. Even though this guy died in 94, so most of it was just going to be a lot of old footage for any time John Candy was on screen. I will say, if I had one complaint, it would be that some of the audio is a little quiet in the beginning of the film. A little bit hard to hear what some of the people were saying. I think they should have maybe moved closer to the camera or maybe got a better microphone or something. But don't worry, that's not really a huge issue with this film, and it's mostly more in the beginning part. The rest of the audio becomes pretty clear and very well easy to hear for the rest of the movie. While it is pretty put together and interesting, this film also got sad during some parts when they went into the whole death thing, like with John Candy, knowing what it's like to lose a father at a young age, and then he himself also dying at a young age. Yeah, there was stuff him and his friends had to go through dealing with loss, and it's not easy in life. Listening to some of this stuff does make me kind of teary-eyed almost. You know, it's one thing to become famous in life, but then your bad habits slowly start catching up to you and ultimately play a part in your death. 'Cause like I said, John Candy had a bad habit, like drinking, smoking, eating junk food, and him not wanting to listen to medical advice because the doctors would just tell him, oh, stop, knock off the junk food or whatever, and he didn't want to hear any of that. Although there actually was one point where John Candy was trying to lose some weight, but then when he slowly started getting famous, some of the actors he worked with liked his weight, so he started eating more to kind of gain it back. Even with a running time of almost 2 hours, I think this film went on for just the right amount of time to document all of its information. Nothing felt overly long or stressed, except for maybe like a few little parts here and there. But for the most part, it actually was worth the whole running time for what they had to present in this documentary. Like I said, this was good. A nice documentary about John Candy. This is the first John Candy related movie in 30 years since Canadian Bacon in 1995. Yeah. And like I said earlier, I'm surprised it took him this long to even make a documentary about John Candy, in all honesty. This feels like the kind of thing that you would think they would have done a lot sooner, given his fame in Canada and some of the roles that he has done. I almost forgot to mention, but there's also a few funny parts in this documentary as well. Some moments got a smirk or a chuckle out of me. Again, I forgot just how funny John Candy used to be. And I haven't seen any of his stuff in a while. But I forgot just how charming and funny this guy could be. Even when they're like replaying clips of him or some of the shows that he was in before. As presented in this documentary, John Candy did play a lot of silly, goofy roles during his career. He was really good at the comedian stuff. At one point during the credits, they even have a clip of Peter Griffin from Family Guy, and I'm like, what the heck? That caught me off guard. But hey, at least they used a funny line for that. There is some swearing in this movie, but not too much. Although I get why it's there, especially for some of the clips that they use. Again, this film is rated PG-13 for a reason, among other stuff like substances, smoking, alcohol, just all that kind of stuff that went on during John Candy's career. Overall, I had a good time with this movie. For a John Candy documentary, I thought they did a good job, and it was nicely put together. If I had to give this movie a rating, I would give it a 9 out of 10. Yeah, that's just how much I enjoyed this documentary movie. Again, there is maybe some few slight things I would trim. I would try to make the audio sound a little better in the beginning of this movie so I can hear what everyone is saying. But overall, this movie is great. If you're into John Candy at all, or Canadian film history, or just a piece of the entertainment industry, you want to hear some info, you're at an age where you can handle this type of information, I would recommend this movie. For giving it a watch if you can. It might be almost 2 hours, but it's worth it in my opinion for what's presented here. Again, very interesting movie, a little bit of funny stuff and even gets kind of emotional at certain points. So yeah, that was my review video for John Candy I Like Me documentary film. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video, so goodbye.